Hello guys and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be showing you guys a very special deck profile that was actually voted by you guys on my Twitter account. Every once in a while I will be holding more polls to kind of see what you guys would like to see on my channel. But for this we have branded Dogmatika Invoked Eldlich. This is one of my favorite decks. Without saying too much, let's go ahead and jump on into it. So of course, starting off with the branded stuff, we do run 2 copies of Fallen of Albaz. This card says that if this card is normal or special summoned, except during the damage step, you can discard 1 card, fusion summon 1 fusion monster from your extra deck, using monsters on either field as fusion materials. But it has to also have, this card. But it cannot. But you cannot use other monsters you control as fusion materials. So that means you have to use Fallen of Albaz and 1 monster your opponent controls. That effect doesn't really come up too much, however, it does every once in a while come up to kind of help break your opponent's board and set up your own. Continuing on, we do run 1 copy of the Light Hex Sealed Fusion. This card can pretty much be a substitution for any of your fusion material, required fusion materials. Main reason why we run this is so that way we can summon Dragoon. However, we also do run Blue Eyes Tyrant Dragon to be able to kind of recycle some of our cards. Continuing on, I do run 1 copy of Tri-Brigade Mercurier. This card is a hand trap that negates monster effects if you control a fusion monster that requires Fallen of Albaz as one of the materials. Then to wrap up the monsters for the branded engine, I do run 1 copy of Eluber to kind of be able to search out any branded spell or trap card when it is normal or special summons. There's really not much other use for this. You can fuse it off for one of the other cards that you'll see in the extra deck. Continuing on to the branded spells, we of course run 3 copies of Branded Opening to be able to see our Eluber for practically free. Just discard 1 card and you just immediately get a card back. Really good card. Continuing on, we do of course run 3 copies of Branded Fusion. This card says that you can fusion summon 1 fusion monster that mentions Fallen of Albaz by using materials from your hand, deck, or field as fusion material. So practically this card just says that if you have this card, you can practically just start your combos immediately. And that is the main search target off of Eluber. The only downside to this card is you can only fusion summon the turn you activate this card. So practically if you have to link into your copy of Artemis, the Magistus Moon Maiden, then you cannot activate Branded Fusion, but sometimes you just have to see it for your Invoked plays. Continuing on, we do run 1 copy of Branded in Red. This card says that you can target 1 Despia monster or Fallen of Albaz in your graveyard, add it to your hand, and then you apply the effect. Then you apply the following effect. You can then fusion summon 1 level 8 or higher fusion monster from your extra deck by banishing fusion materials on it, listed on it, from your hand or field, but it cannot attack directly this turn. Main reason why we have this is so that way we can set up Masquerade or just pretty much whatever we need to kind of stop our, make it harder for our opponents. And then of course to wrap it up, I run 1 copy of Branded Lost to kind of act as our 4th copy of Magical Meltdown, being able to protect your monsters for your fusion summons. And then on top of that, it also says that if you fusion summon while this card is on the field, you can add 1 card that mentions Fallen of Albaz in its text, which of course would be the Tri-Brigade and Mercurier to kind of set up a hand trap for your opponent's turn as well. So that's it for the branded stuff. Moving on to the Dogmatika engine, we of course do run 2 copies of Dogmatika Ecclesia. This card says that if it is normal or special summoned, you can search for a Dogmatika card. However, it also cannot be destroyed by battle with a monster that was special summoned from the extra deck. And if there is a monster from the extra deck on the field, you can just freely special summon it. So practically, you have a monster on the field, you just special summon this. However, the main downside to this is after you activate the effect to search, you are then locked out of the extra deck for the rest of the turn. Which, is kind of big, but you're going to be doing most of your fusion summons before you actually summon this card. Continuing on, we do run one copy of Dogmatika Fleur-de-Lis. This card is yet another hand trap that just says that if there is if there's a extract monster on the field, you can special summon it. And if you control another Dogmatika monster, which of course you'd be controlling the Ecclesia that you used to search this, you'd be able to then negate one monster your opponent controls. This card also has another effect that says that when your Dogmatika monster declares an attack, you can make all Dogmatika monsters you can currently control gain 500 attack. That is a permanent gain, however, you can also only use that effect, any of the effects, once per turn. Continuing on, we do, of course, run 3 copies of our Nadir Servant to be able to kind of search out our Ecclesia by sending one monster from the extra deck to the graveyard and then adding one Dogmatika monster or Fallen of Elbaz from your deck or your graveyard to your hands that has less attack than, less than or equal to the sent monsters in the graveyard. Also, for the rest of the turn, you cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck. Practically, Dogmatika just does not like summoning from the extra deck. To wrap it up, we do run, of course, one copy of Dogmatika Punishment. This card says that you can target one face-up monster your opponent controls, send one monster with equal or higher attack from your extra deck to the graveyard. If you do, destroy that monster. And then, of course, the downside to this card is until the end of your next turn, you cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck. So it does slow down the deck a little bit. However, practically we run a couple cards that can work with this to kind of just really hinder our opponent. And then we do also run one copy of Schism, because the main card we send off of Nadir Servant is App Cologne to search Schism to set up Window on our opponent's turn. Really strange that they did not hit Window. I kind of expected them to, but they didn't, so I mean, I can't really complain. I'm getting to play it in one of my favorite decks, and it's going to be somewhat oppressive if you can't get over it. Continuing on to the Invoked, of course, we do run 3 copies of Alistair the Invoker. This card says that whenever you normal summon this card, you can then search for an invocation. This card also has another effect that says that you can discard this card from your hand, target one fusion monster on the field, and then you can increase that monster's attack by 1,000. So it's just kind of like a worse honest, but you can kind of just recycle it back to your hand pretty easily. Continuing on, we do run 3 copies of Magical Meltdown. This card allows you to search for Alistair the Invoker, as well as be able to keep your opponent from responding to the activation of fusion spells or the effects of fusion monsters on summon, which is really good, in my opinion. And then, of course, to search Magical Meltdown, we do run 1 copy of Terraforming. Kind of required, because you kind of want to see this. You want to see one of these in your opening hands. And then, of course, to go with the Alistair, we do run 2 copies of Invocation. This card says that you can fusion summon monsters from the extra deck using monsters in your hand, or you can banish the materials if you have an Alistair on your field, and you can also use cards like in the graveyard, just banish them. You can also use like your opponent's monsters, which is really good, being able to kind of like say they have a light, you just use that and this and make Macabre. Pretty easy. But that's it for the Invocation engine. Really kind of like standard for Invocation. However, then of course, moving on to the Eldlich, we do run 2 copies of Eldlich the Golden Lord. This card is really good, being able to send this card and 1 spell or trap card from your hand to the graveyard to target 1 card on the field and sends it to the graveyard. So it doesn't destroy, it sends. It also has another effect that says you can send 1 spell or trap card you control to the graveyard, add this card to your hand, then you can special summon 1 zombie monster from your hand, and if you do, until the end phase of your opponent's turn, it gains 1,000 attack and defense, cannot be destroyed by card effects. So practically, main thing is you add this off of its own effect, summon it out. It's a 3,500, hard for your opponent to get over. Continuing on, we do run 3 copies of Eldlich and Scarlet Sanguine. Of course, this being actually one of the best Eldlich traps in the deck, being able to special summon out 1 zombie type monster from your deck or graveyard, But if you control no Eldlich monsters, you can only special summon Eldlich monsters, which of course we'd only be summoning really Eldlich the Golden Lord. This card also says that if you do activate that effect for the rest of the turn after this card resolves, you cannot special summon monsters except for zombie monsters, which of course mainly you'd be using this on your opponent's turn to kind of summon out your Eldlich and work with the other cards that are in your that are in the deck as well. It also has another effect that says you can banish this card from your graveyard, set one Golden Land spell or trap directly from your deck. But you can only use one effect per turn, and only once that turn, which I mean isn't too bad because the fact of it is a trap card, so you can always just use that effect to set cards on your opponent's end phase, just to be able to keep your resources up. Continuing on, of course, we do run 3 copies of Conquistador. This card says that you can special summon this card as a normal monster. It's going to be a zombie light, level 5, 500 attack, 1,800 defense monster. And then if you control an Eldlich the Golden Lord, you can destroy one face-up card on the field. And then it also has, of course, the other effect that says during the end phase, you can banish this card from your graveyard to set one Elixir spell or trap directly from your deck. So practically, you'd be able to use this to set your Scarlet Sanguine to kind of summon out more Eldlich monsters, more Eldlich the Golden Lord, which is actually pretty good. And then, of course, to wrap it up, we do run 2 copies of Hakero of the Golden Lands to... Practically, this card says that you can special summon this card as a normal monster, zombie light, level 5 with 1,800 attack and 1,500 defense. This card, these cards are of course still treated as trap cards. And then this says you can banish one card from your, if you control an Eldlich the Golden Lord, you can banish one card from either graveyard. So practically, if you had, let's say you had both of these set, you would activate Chainlink 1, activate Scarlet Sanguine as Chainlink 2, so that way you can summon out your Eldlich the Golden Lord, summon out Hakero, banish a monster from either your graveyard, but mainly you'd be using it for your opponents. And that would also really hurt, like, tier limits, for instance. They try to fusion summon, you just tell them you don't have that monster anymore, you cannot activate effect. Really good. And of course, it also has the effect of, if it's in the graveyard, you can banish it during the end phase to set a Elixir card from your deck. So that would, of course, as I said earlier, get you to your Elixir of Scarlet Sanguine. Really good cards. I really like this deck because it combines a bunch of my favorite strategies. But moving on to the extra deck, we do, of course, run 2 copies, of Albion the Branded Dragon. This card says that if this card is fusion summoned, you can fusion summon one level 8 or higher fusion monster from your extra deck, except for Albion the Branded Dragon, by banishing the fusion materials from the graveyard. So that would, of course, get you to your Mirror Jade, or it could get you to your Red Eyes, because we do run the Red Eyes Dark Dragoon, because we do run the Light Hex Healed Fusion. And then this also has another effect that says that if this card is in the graveyard because it was sent there this turn during the end phase, you can add to your hand 1 branded spell or trap directly from your deck. You can only use each effect once per turn. So practically, if this is in the graveyard during the end phase, you get to search, which is amazing. Continuing on, we of course do run 2 copies of Lubellion. This card says that if this card is fusion summoned, you can discard 1 card to fusion summon 1 level 8 or higher fusion monster from the extra deck, except Lubellion, the Searing Dragon, by shuffling fusion materials mentioned on it into the deck. So you practically be able to use that effect for, to fuse from the field, graveyard, or face-up banished cards, and then for the rest of the turn you cannot attack. So practically, this card cannot attack if you use that effect, which, I mean, this card most likely isn't going to stay on the field for too long. Another downside to this card is once you activate this effect, you're not special summon monsters from the extra deck except for fusion monsters, which, I mean, we have so many cards in this deck that lock you into fusion monsters that it doesn't really matter too much. Continuing on, we do, of course, run 1 copy of Mirror Jade. Mirror Jade is actually really amazing, being able to once per every other turn, you can send one monster from the extra deck to the graveyard to banish one monster with attack. I think it's equal to or greater than that monster. So practically, let's say I sent a Lubellion, I'd be able to banish one monster that is a 2500 or lower, and that just kind of gets them off the field. And then, of course, this card also has another effect that during the end phase, if this card is in the graveyard because it was sent there this turn, you can practically just Raigeki your opponent, destroy all monsters on the field. However, it does have to leave by an opponent's card effect, not your own, which, I mean, that's fine, really. And then, of course, to wrap up the branded monsters, we do run one copy of Masquerade, the Blazing Dragon. This card says that while you control this fusion summon card, your opponent must pay 600 life points to activate cards or effects. If your opponent controls a Ritual, Fusion, Synchro, Xyz, or Link monster while this card is in your graveyard, quick effect, you can special summon this card, but banish it when it leaves the field. You can only use each effect once per turn, so practically it's just a burn card, which is actually really good, being able to go if you need to summon it for time. And because it requires a Despia monster and a light or dark monster, you'd be using your one copy of Veluber to kind of go into this, using like Brandon Red, or just any other thing that you would need. And then, of course, I do run one copy of Red Eyes Dark Dragoon. I don't really need to go into this too much. The only downside to it in this deck is that you do not get to pop your opponent's cards, but it does set up a really good Omni Negate. And then we do run one copy of Blue Eyes Tyrant Dragon. This card says that this card that it can attack all monsters your opponent controls once each. Then once per turn during the end of the damage step, if this card battled, you can target one trap in your graveyard and set it to your spell and trap zone, so that will be able to get your Eldlich cards back if you are desperate for it, like Hikaro, for instance, being able to stop Tier Lament or just whatever you really need. Really good, in my opinion. I don't think I'd change this. I like the fact that we can play these cards with the Light the Hexfield Fusion, being able to kind of tutor it out using one of these two monsters. Really not a bad engine, especially in, this format. And then continuing on, we do run, of course, one copy of Elder Entity and Tis. This card says that if this card is sent to the graveyard, you can target one card on the field and destroy it. So practically you would use this for your Dogmatika punishment, send this, and you practically get to pop two cards on your opponent's side of the field. Then, of course, we run one copy of Titaniclad, the Ash Dragon. This card says that the only effect that really matters in this case is if this card is sent to the graveyard this turn by a card effect, you can search for a Dogmatika card, a Dogmatika monster during the end phase of the turn, as long as this card was, in the graveyard to activate the effect. Continuing on, we do run one copy of App Cologne. This is our main send target, the target that we send for Nadir Servant. However, you could also run Kit Kalos in this deck to kind of be able to send to try to mill your Eldlich monsters. I want to run it eventually, I just have to find a spot for it. But this card says that whenever it's sent to the graveyard, you can search for pretty much a Shaddoll spell or trap. So of course you'd be searching for Schism, because Schism has an effect where pretty much you can banish the requirements for a fusion summon from on your opponent's turn. So you practically summon Winda using Schism by practically fusing App Cologne and one of your dark monsters that you would go through for your other plays. For those who don't know what Winda does, each player can only summon special summon one time. So practically you get a normal summon and a special summon, that's it. Really good floodgate monster. It's also being seen in Tier Lament, so you do want to be careful of that. Continuing on to the the Invoked core, we do run one copy of Makaba. I have been thinking about trying to bump this up to 2, however, right now the extra deck is in a kind of a tight spot, and I don't really know what to cut for it. But practically, this is a quick effect once per turn. When a spell, trap, or monster effect is activated, you can send the same the same type of card, monster, spell, or trap from your hand to the graveyard to negate the activation. And if you do banish that card, then we also do run 1 copy of Kaliga. Invoked Kaliga has the effect that says if a opponent's monster attempts to activate its effect, none of that player's monsters can activate their effect for the rest of the turn. So practically, your opponent gets they only get 1 monster effect. So I've actually had games where I set up both Kaliga and Winda, because they only got 1 special summon and 1 monster effect, and they really couldn't do much at that point. Also, the other part about Kaliga is each player can only attack with 1 monster during each battle phase, which, I mean, isn't too bad, but it also really slows down your opponent as well. And then, of course, to wrap it up, we do run 1 copy of Artemis, the Magistus Moon Maiden. And the reason why we run this is the requirement of 1 level 4 lower spellcaster monster, which would be our copy of Alistair the Invoker, to kind of be able to use Invocation immediately, and just banish this and your Alistair the Invoker in graveyard to make your Makaba. Alright, so that's going to be about it for the video, guys. Be sure to leave a like, comment down below what you think of the deck profile. Tell me what you guys would possibly change, what you would add to make this deck even better. Be sure to check out the Twitter down in the description, so that way you can keep up with whenever I do polls, and as well as upload times, and kind of just, just trying to keep up with the community. But yeah, that's going to be about it for the video, guys. See ya!